All right. Thank you. So I promised some students that I would make a little video to kind of talk through, especially those that couldn't come to campus at all, to kind of do their prep and go through and don't want to have to just rely on the facilitator guide. So I'm going to try to make this quick, maybe 10, 15 minutes, just to kind of give the key things that we're doing. And then I'll probably go on a little bit after that, talking about the place layout a little bit more. So if people are not familiar with the core curriculum and want to hear a little bit about that. I'm still going to try to kind of do an extended version of that, of adding some comments and thoughts and kind of suggestions, and get that to y'all at some point today, so I can have that in front of y'all tomorrow, right? So I'm going to share my screen here and mainly kind of pull up. So there I am in the corner now. So this is a facilitator guide that is a Google Doc that you can go through. Overall idea here is we're running a summit that's going to be about 220 college students from across the state of Colorado, from like 10 different institutions. They do this every year. Primarily, these students are part of the presidential leadership programs of those different schools. And essentially, they do this every year, and they've given the CBD the bulk of this meeting. So the meeting itself is 8:15 to 5, and we're running from 9 to 2. We're essentially running 3 sessions. The first session and the third session are going to be kind of a big room where they're going to have their meals. There'll be 32 different tables, and we'll have 1 student per table for that. Session 1 and 3 is mostly me talking, going through some concepts, but also throwing it to the tables. Session 1, we have one in particular kind of activity we'll do, a values activity that a lot of y'all will be familiar with. And then session 3 is a little bit more flexible. We're going to be debriefing what we did in the breakouts when we actually kind of go through an NIF process. So session 3 is going to be more kind of explaining what we did and why, and kind of touching to theory. But again, every once in a while, I want to throw it to the tables to talk about facilitators, what facilitators do, and talk about individual skills and those type of things. But session 3 is not as scheduled out. From the front of the room, I'll make it clear what I want y'all to do, and you'll kind of figure it out, right? So the idea, if you're driving yourself, the event starts at 8:15, but the first 45 minutes are there talking. So if you get there before 8:15, you can be seated at the table. If you get there after 8:15, you'll kind of gather in the hall. Kramer will be out there to kind of check you in and get you your envelope with all your stuff. And then when they introduce me at 9, then I'll kind of invite y'all to come and kind of join us. We won't go into small group until 9:30. But we would rather have y'all sitting at 9 before I kind of go into send y'all to small groups. But the first 30 minutes or so will be me kind of setting some things up. You should be able to park in the parking garage at Tavelli. You've got that link there to the campus map. So we're in the Tavelli Student Center, and there's a parking garage right next to it. Just park. It's free to park, free to get in, and then I'll give you a voucher. So if you parked yourself, make sure at some point you get a voucher from me or from Megan. Megan is the person we're working with there on campus, right? So here's the overall kind of look of it. I just kind of walk through a little bit of it, but 3 sessions, one kind of from 9 to 10:15. Then we'll have a break, 15 minutes. The second session are going to be in breakout groups across the building, right? So I sent that document that kind of has your room number and your group number. Rooms will have more than 1 group in them. And that's where you'll do the middle part of the day, which is, again, walking through an NIF process, a placemat, a 1-page placemat that we developed focused on core curriculum, right? Then for lunch, you'll actually be back. We'll be together in room 320 while they'll be back in the main room. So we'll have lunch together, just CPD, to kind of debrief a little bit and kind of finalize what we're doing for that third session, and also kind of share out kind of what you heard. You'll have an easel with a list of ideas that are got voted on. At the end of session 2, you'll bring that to lunch, because we'll kind of be playing with that as we kind of go, right? So when you get here, most of y'all will get an envelope. So there's kind of 3 groups of students. If you look at that, where I assigned you. So the primary facilitators is the 26 of you that are going to be facilitating session 1, 2, and 3. There's another 6 of you that will be facilitating session 1 and 3. And there's a few of the brand new students that are primarily going to be note takers for session 2. The reason for that is in the large room for sessions 1 and 3, we've got 32 tables of 7 students each, with 1 CPD student. For the breakout rooms, we have bigger groups. There'll be 8 or 9 students per group. So there's only 26. So 26 of you are facilitating all 3. We need 6 extra tables to cover the smaller tables in session 1 and 3, and then a few of y'all just observe 1 and 3 and help with session 2. So you'll get an envelope with all this material in there. I try to kind of minimize so there's not too much, so you kind of see on here what you'll be passing out. It'll be all in the envelope kind of clearly. The envelope will have your name and your room number. Your group number is the same as your table number. That will kind of match up. So the table in the Turhill room and the group number that you have will be the same as you go through. So you'll be at the same table for session 1 and 3. Right? So the main thing I'm going to be talking, my talk is going to focus a little bit more on polarization at the beginning, really talk about some of the new stuff that some of y'all haven't heard about human nature, why we're so polarized, and then start talking about, okay, how do we depolarize? And I'll primarily kind of get into the basics of wicked problems. As I start getting the basics of wicked problems, I'll do the quick typical values thing with the 5 values from the preamble, and then I'll send it to the tables to do this deeper kind of values exercise. And the way this works is you'll pass out, we have these little sets of cards with 9 values on them. You can see that the values are kind of listed right here on activity instructions, but they'll have these cards, card stock, small cards, and we ask them first to arrange them from most important to least important, and then we kind of have a series of questions. And it's all just to kind of get them thinking about values, get them thinking and give them an example of that notion that we all kind of have the same values. What makes us is different is how we rank them, and how can you make the case for the value that you rank the lowest, and how can you make the case against your top value, and what tensions are inherent between your values, and those type of things. So you have about 15 minutes to really dig into this value discussion that will be set up with me really talking about wicked problems and our need to kind of see things in different ways. After that, I'll go back, I'll talk a little bit more leading up to about 10:15, and before we go to break into the breakouts, I'll set up the discussion a little bit of why we're talking about core curriculum, why we picked that topic, and some basics. I'll touch on the 4 approaches, so you won't have to do that much. And then I'll go back, we'll do a little clicker question about these 8 purposes of higher ed that we've played with before. So we'll ask them to say which of these are most important to you, and which of these do you think universities do more of or not doing enough of. As we do that, you might want to, on your facilitator guide, just write down the numbers for that second question of what they think universities should do more of. I think that'll be interesting information for your second session. All right, so then we'll have 15 minutes for y'all to get up to your groups, to your different rooms, and hopefully everyone's kind of ready to go at 10:30. And you'll have a different group because they're going to randomly sit at the tables for breakfast and for the intro session. These are actually going to be assigned groups, so you should have a table that's from very different universities, so a pretty diverse table in some interesting ways. So when you're in the breakouts here, you'll have 2 students per table, so you'll have a note taker who will either be a CPD student, or about half of you will have some volunteers like the staff people from Presidential Leadership Program or some student leaders. Worst case scenario, we might have a few of you that just audio record if they don't have enough note takers, and then you'll be able to do the notes later. But we'll only do that for CPD students who actually get hours in a way. But session 2 is basically an NIF process. So again, you can kind of see, let me pull up the, this is the thing that we developed. So I attached and kind of sent it. 4 approaches. So you'll do an introduction first, focus on those 8 purposes. So kind of have people introduce themselves and have them say their university and their major and their year, or maybe their hometown, to get to know each other briefly. And then kind of ask, of those 8 purposes we looked at, which do you think universities do you do more of, or just generally respond to kind of that, those 8. Those 8 are going to be listed on a green worksheet that everyone will have. Mainly the worksheet for these breakout groups, they won't have tables, so they won't be able to write. Right? So the worksheet's mainly for them to take, and during lunch and from 1 to 2, we want kind of the last, what's something you like and what you don't like from each of the approaches, and then a few just assessment questions. But I added just the 8 purposes, so they have that there in front of them, right? So when you get in the group, you'll pass out the placemat, which is an 11 by 17 sheet, and you'll pass out the green worksheet, right? And basically just need a green worksheet for the intro question of the 8 purposes, so they have that in front of them. So intro should take around 10 minutes just to kind of go around, not really facilitating, not interaction, just kind of letting each person kind of speak once, maybe a little paraphrasing or maybe some probing questions, but not reaction questions or transition questions. Then you'll get into the 4 approaches. So we got 4 approaches. We're timing it 12 minutes each. The timing in the breakout groups is yours. So I set it 10 minutes for intro, 12 minutes each approach. That should give you about 20-25 minutes for some discussion, kind of overall discussion questions, and then a little action list and voting process at the end. But you have some flexibility there. You don't have to time it exactly 12. If your conversation is going well, You can stick with that approach. If the conversation is slowing down, you can go to another approach early, right? So as long as you get through the 4 approaches and you have some time for discussion questions. So I'm not going to walk through these detail now. I might go back at the end of the video if people want to, but I want to get the little basics down as quick as possible. So approach 1, we did a survey. We got 150 responses to the survey, or so maybe 120, about some of these issues with core curriculum. We picked this topic because it is a growing importance topic. So a lot of people are talking about it, but it's a wicked problem, right? There's lots of interesting tensions, in particular between kind of individual choice of students and, does the university choose, and also does the department choose? So there's some battles like of majors wanting more hours and less core curriculum. And then when you talk about core curriculum, is what's the purpose of it? And are those purposes actually being delivered? And some people saying we need to add to those purposes. We need to do more with diversity and sustainability and some of those things. But clearly those have a progressive bent. So there's some pushback on that kind of as well, right? So from the surveys, when asking people what they want to do, I will say the surveys, people are generally pretty happy with the core curriculum. There was some real frustration. I know when I deal with seniors, there's always a lot of frustration. About 40% of our group here Saturday is freshmen. So they've actually liked their core curriculum. So it's not a hot button topic, but in some ways that works well, because deliberation, we want to deliberate kind of these tough issues before they get too hot. So that's one of the reasons we picked this, and obviously they all have some experience with these issues. And we've got people listening. I mean, I think the university will be really interested in the data that we'll put together from these 200 college students. So the 3 approaches: maximize student choice. Approach 1 is like, okay, let's cut down this core, right? Let's let students kind of pick what they want. They're the ones paying. It's getting more and more expensive. Why force them to take classes they might not want to take or they don't feel is useful to them, right? So that's the general idea. The placement has a quick overview, has some specific actions you can dig into, has some specific arguments of supporting it, and then some trade-offs. And obviously a lot of the trade-offs, as a typical NIF, start broad, just let them respond. What do y'all think about this? You might ask about some specific points. If everyone loves something, you might want to highlight the trade-offs, or vice versa. If everyone hates something, you might want to try to push them to, what are some of the things you might like here. So first one's maximize student choice. Second one is more departments need to kind of have more control, right? So students that are going in engineering should take some core curriculum that really makes sense for engineers, or people that are doing liberal law. So each department could better know what do I really want my students to know. So instead of a common university core, you almost have more requirements for the major, and the major figures that out, right? And one particularly interesting thing that's been coming up a lot lately is, there might be 4 or 5 majors in engineering that decides they can have a common core. We want all engineers to have these courses, and then as a junior and a senior, then they specify to mechanical engineering or aerospace, and that's called a meta major. That maybe you have a common kind of core, but it's still a somewhat specific core to an area, to a general area, and then you specify later on, right? So obviously some of the drawbacks of both. The drawbacks of approach 1 is that students might not know, and do we want them to kind of pick their choice, their classes, or do we want the university to say, no, we want all college students to have certain experiences? And approach 2 might focus too much on the major, might make college too much of just a training program versus kind of an overall experience. Approach 3 is kind of, this is actually built from a lot of people that said it's going pretty well, right? It's not that bad of a program. And so it's okay, stick with the kind of current, what we do, but just do it a little bit better, right? So it's some more kind of minor tweaks in a way of things that we can do to kind of get it a little bit better, so that all these experiences are kind of positive experiences, instead of some other ones, right? Letting me kind of, there we go. Trying to get that. So the last approach is kind of the most robust one. And this is the notion that we need to rethink the core and not get rid of it, but maybe almost expand it or switch things out and focus more on what we need in the 21st century. So a big part of that is critical thinking. Critical thinking has always kind of been a part of lots of cores, but was it done right? And clearly in our society now, we're lacking critical thinkers. So how do we really do critical thinking right? Or on the flip side, the kind of second bullet point there is, do we need to make sure all college students are exposed and really understand how to work with diversity and inclusivity, or to think about a global world, to think about sustainability, and those type of things. And so these are, again, kind of more value-based kind of things that we need students exposed to this. Those will kind of be up for some potential kind of pushback in terms of kind of indoctrination, right? people saying, well, that's not the role of college in a way, right? But there's a big battle, a big tension right now thinking, do universities need to say all college students need exposed to these concepts or not, right? So you'll walk through each approach like normal. Don't try to cover everything on approach. Just have some good conversation. We'll have 26 groups going through this, so we'll have tons of good data. And then after that, switch back to the share and go back to the facilitation guide. So after you go through the approaches and give you some ideas here, I got a set of reflection questions. I got 8 there for you to use. I'm not expecting you to use all 8. You might only have time for 1 or 2, depending on how well it sparks. So read through those, see which one you like. Maybe depending on your group, you kind of jump on it. They don't have these in front of them, so it's just kind of which ones, or you can even go beyond that. But it's the idea that we've had the conversation about the 3. Now we got some time to come in the 4, get beyond the 4. So look through those, pick which one you like. If you're on time, you should still, you should have about 17 minutes or so to kind of play with these a little bit, and just make sure you leave time for the final question, which is something that we've done a lot. We'll have an easel paper there, and we just ask everybody, okay, after this conversation, after the hour and a half talking about this issue, what's the most important thing you want an administrator to know? And have everyone think about that, and then say it and capture it. The note taker now can just capture it on the easel, and instead of just kind of on the notes. So you'll get a nice little list of 8 items, one person each, that says, this is the one thing I really want to do. They might pull something specifically from the placemat, or they might have something completely different. I actually prefer them to have something completely different, right? Just in their own words, what do you think we should do about core curriculum and these type of things? So once you get to 8, maybe talk about it a little bit if you have some time. Let people kind of ask questions of each other, or kind of make the case for theirs. Then there'll be a little envelope in your smaller envelope and your bigger envelope with 8 sets of 3 dots, right? And you pass those out, let everyone vote. They can pick 3 as their top 3, or they can kind of put 2 on their number 1 and 1 on their number 2 if they like. I would rather them not put all 3 on 1, but you don't have to police that closely in a sense. And that will just kind of give us a sense of priority, because part of what we're really trying to do is to kind of show process, show them different ways of kind of engaging people. So we wanted to have at least a little bit of a dot process is kind of what we're going through. Right? So with that, you can release them. They'll go back to the main room for lunch. We'll be, again, in room 320 for lunch, but I think you'll have to go back down to the main room to get food and then bring it back up to 320. Main room's on the 2nd floor, so it's just a floor off. And then we'll have the hour together for lunch to kind of see how it went and kind of play with those easels. If it makes sense, I might be kind of theming those easels and come up with a top 10 kind of ideas and pop that on a clicker question to ask them. And then around 12:55, so we'll be back down in the same room that we started with for session 3. And this one, again, I've got it sketched out here, but I might still kind of play with it a little bit as we're going, kind of depending on how the day is going and depending on really how far I got on the first, because I've got limited time on the first, so I'm not sure how far I get in the discussion. But we want to spend some time reporting out kind of what we heard potentially with clicker questions and those type of things. Some small time, and there'll be a different facilitator probably. You'll be a group that was in different groups. So we want to talk about, how did you think it went, right? To get them talking about process. So this last hour is about process rather than the topic, right? We're going to think about what we learned about the topic. And then I'll have some more to discuss to really get into the nuts and bolts of deliberation now, kind of explaining what we did and why we did it, and how we built the framework and why the framework is designed that way and what the facilitator did and those type of things. So we do want one of y'all at each table, just because I might send it to the table. I talk about that for 5 minutes, right? Kind of get a sense from each other and from, so I'll try to do that at least 2 times, maybe 3 times, just to break it up. So it's not me talking for an hour, because you know how I could talk for an hour. And then at 2, we're pretty much done, right? So we'll kind of pack up all the information, and we'll pretty much be done. So in terms of gathering information, to kind of jump back a second, after they do the value thing, we do have a little half sheet of yellow paper that they're just going to write down their final ranking, and that's just so we get that data, right? So a little worksheet that you'll pass out at the end of the values exercise in session 1, and I'll remind y'all. Then we have the green worksheet that we're using for session 2, which I think, let me see if I have it up. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Yeah, so it looks like this. So on one side, it's just kind of like, what's the strongest and the most compelling argument or the strongest concern you have for each approach. On the back is where it has those 8 purposes of higher ed, for y'all to show them at the beginning of that. And then it just has some assessment, our typical assessment kind of questions kind of on there as we go. And so that's basically it. I think I might just kind of keep the video at this. I'm not sure. I guess I can stop my share. I'm not sure how long timing wise I am here. There's no clock here. So hopefully it wasn't too painful. It gives you a sense kind of what I would do if I walk through class. I'll be on email, so feel free to shoot me an email, and I will try to put together kind of a little bit more some thoughts on the explaining some of the bullet points in case they're not clear to you. What I'll probably do is I'll turn that tabloid thing into 4 different pieces of paper, so then I can kind of track changes and comments on the side that just kind of explain my thinking a little bit more. So you get a chance, and you'll be able to have that in front of you kind of if you want to. Right? So again, thanks a lot. I know some of this stuff's last minute, like always with me, but I'm excited about tomorrow. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have and for y'all helping with. All right. So I will talk to you later.